Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It helps the video do better in the algorithm, so that like is much appreciated. Also, if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience, check this out over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Also, real quick, if you enjoy my league content, I have been streaming that over on my 2K channel and releasing edits of the VODs. So if you want to if you like seeing realistic My League stuff, that's over there. I'd appreciate it if you checked it out. But with that said, we're doing now part 2 of our power rankings for every NBA team, obviously. That's what power rankings are. And in the last video, we discussed what will be the worst team in the NBA, looking at the bottom 10 or so teams in the NBA. And this one, we're going to be looking at what I describe as the NBA's middle class. These are teams that are probably going to be in the playoffs, but no one's really going to put them in the contender conversation. I actually have a group of 11 teams here because for me personally, I think that there are 9 teams that are in the contender tier, and that will obviously be in the next episode. As of now, let's talk about these middling teams. Now, the thing that's interesting about middling teams is sometimes it sucks, and sometimes it's just a sign of progress. Like a team that's on here right now is the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic last year made the playoffs for the first time in a very long time, and I don't think they're going to be jumping into a contender category going into their second year now with this roster. However, there's no shame in the fact that they're going to be just a good playoff team. A good playoff team is fine. I think the problem more so comes when you are dragging it out for a very long time and there isn't really much progress to be had, and if anything, there's arguably regression. An example of that would be like honestly both LA teams, but I would say the Clippers right now are one of these middling teams where it just feels like there's not a whole lot of point to it. But with that said, we're going to be going down and starting with the best of the mid. And for me, I think the best mediocre team is going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, an interesting take that I got on a recent Hot Takes video was that Donovan Mitchell should just fucking play point guard. And ever since I've seen that take, while it was something that was in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about it more and more. And it feels to me like the Cleveland Cavaliers, if Donovan Mitchell is indeed going to be sticking around for a while, should probably ship Darius Garland for some sort of off-ball forward. Who that may be, who's to say? But I kind of feel like they're a little redundant, just 2 small guards who are good playmakers and scorers. I feel like I'd rather just have Donovan Mitchell doing that role and then a more 3-and-D type of player out there. But also, they, at the same time, have the exact opposite thing on the defensive end of the floor, where both of their big men have a very similar ability defensively. I would say they're both pretty damn good versatility-wise, not great, but they both move their feet pretty well. Both good rim protectors, both good post defenders, despite the fact that they're pretty scrawny. The defense is so heavily on them, and then the offense for Darius and Mitchell is so heavily on them. Not just the offense, but also the three-point shooting. If you look at the rest of this roster, the three-point shooting gets pretty rough beyond those 2 players. You have Max Strus, who's their primary starter, who is a guy who takes a lot of movement three-pointers, a lot of coming off of screen catch and shoots where like there's a defender contesting on one side or the other, but he's a good enough shooter that he can really laser in on the basket. He shoots well enough on those, but he actually shoots kind of poorly on your standard catch and shoot, which seems contradictory, but every once in a while that does happen. You know, the J.R. Smith effect. I like bad shots more than good shots, but he shoots 35% from 3. That's not great for how high volume he is. Dean Wade shoots a good percentage, but isn't super high volume. Sam Merrill, I believe that's the guy who is on the Cavs, also shot the ball exceptionally well this season. So there's not no shooting, but there isn't a lot of great shooting. Their other ball handler, Karis LeVert, also not somebody who's a super strong 3-point threat. That said, of all of these mediocre teams, I think they are the closest thing to a contender category. The only reason I wouldn't categorize them as that is because they just have too many of their eggs in too many specific ass baskets. Like, it's not all in one basket, it's really all in 2. Their defensive game, all of the eggs on defense are in the Mobley and Allen basket, and all of the eggs on offense are in the Mitchell and Darius basket. And having either end of the floor almost solely dictated by 2 players isn't that great of a structure, but these guys are all very good at the thing that they do. So like it still ultimately results in a good team, but a team that has a cap on it, a cap that keeps them out of the contender category, at least by my standard. Right below them, there's really probably 3 more teams below them, maybe even 4 that you could argue that might also end up being on that like cusp of contender conversation. At 11, I'm going with the Sacramento Kings. I think that offensively speaking, it'll be interesting to see because there is the potential fear of like, if you got a De'Aaron Fox down season from 3 after having a career year from outside last season, that would be bad because for his career, he has been a poor three-point shooter, 32%, not the highest volume. Obviously, Sabonis, well, he has shot threes occasionally and shot decent on remarkably low volume. He is, well, remarkably low volume. It's not really a staple of his game in any capacity. And DeMar DeRozan, obviously, not a three-point guy. So those are 3 guys who are all going to be starting for your team that might not be able to bring three-point shooting to the table. Now they have Keegan Murray, they have Malik Monk, they have Kevin Huerter, so there are shooters available and you can try your best to run lineups where those 3 guys don't have to share the floor all the time. But with the closing lineup, with your primary lineup, that could be a concern. So De'Aaron Fox's 3-ball staying solid is very heavily important for them this year. That said, it's not as though you have to be a great high-volume three-point shooting team if you are very good in the paint. The Denver Nuggets won a championship in 2023 by being a dominant paint team. They had Aaron Gordon rolling to the basket constantly, Jokic, who does not miss from floater range, Jamal Murray, who's a really strong slasher and gets to the free throw line. So they dominated the paint and then shot low volume but decent percentage on three-pointers. It's not a recipe for failure. However, the Sacramento Kings, being one of the best offenses in the NBA like a year ago, they were statistically like the best of all time at that time, which that number changes every single year, so it's not like that big of a deal. But they were the best offense in the NBA, and that was primarily because off of the Fox and Sabonis pick and roll or 2-man game, sometimes it's handoff action, you then are surrounding that with shooters. I am a little afraid that DeMar DeRozan could get in the way of that. The trade-off of that, however, is that you are even better at inside the arc scoring. And the big positive that DeMar DeRozan brings to them is what you call like shoebox scoring, your ability to score with just no space around you whatsoever, like you're in a shoebox. When you get to the end of the shot clock and you just need someone to put some shit up and hopefully it'll work, DeMar DeRozan is a great option for that. And sometimes their offense and crunch time specifically wouldn't always be so, like, I feel like DeMar would be better for that. Also, that's not necessarily true because De'Aaron Fox has been a really strong clutch performer in the past. I think he even maybe was at least in contention for clutch player of the year, if not outright a winner. DeMar spacing, Fox spacing, Sabonis spacing could be a hindrance on their offense, and they're of course not a very strong defense, so I have some concerns for them, but they're also probably the most talented team in this particular category, and they have enough talent that I think it more than overrides potential fit concerns. So yeah, the Sacramento Kings are probably going to be quite a good team this year. Obviously, they missed the playoffs last year via the play-in. I think they're probably a perennial playoff team for the next couple of seasons, unless some other teams just leapfrog them. Number 12 is the New Orleans Pelicans, the team that consistently ends up disappointing me. Pretty much every year, I have picked them to finally break through, and it hasn't really happened, whether it be from Zion injuries, Brandon Ingram injuries, poor fit between those two, Zion not being as dominant, even though he did play 70 games last year. A lot of the players on this team not always having the best fit. Jonas Valanciunas was holding them back. I don't really think the rookie center that they're going with this year is really going to be all that much better. He might not slow the offensive pace down as much, but you're still going to have to deal with the spacing issues that come with playing a 5 next to Zion, a traditional non-floor spacing 5 next to Zion. I actually strongly believe that the New Orleans Pelicans should trade for Wendell Carter Jr. They have a ton of draft capital, more than they really need, and I'm confident that they could get him for Orlando for the right price, and he would be a center who's a good defensive player who can space the floor as well. But with that said, New Orleans will probably be in a similar territory to what they were last year, which is they have a lot of upside, and in the right context, they could actually go on a run. But will it happen? Probably not. Next, at 13, I have the Orlando Magic. I think they're going to be pretty similar to this year. I like the KCP addition, but I don't think, that's some addition that's going to dramatically increase their chances of being like actually in the contender tier. The main thing there's two main things to watch out for as it relates to Orlando Magic this year, and it is Franz Wagner's jump shot, specifically his three-point shot, because he shot 31% last year, which is terrible, after being a pretty promising three-point shooter in the first 2 seasons of his career. And the other thing is Paolo Banchero's shot diet. He has had an interesting shot diet to this point in his career, and interesting is probably a positive way of spinning it. What I would say is he is not taking advantage of his physical gifts with the shots that he opts for. Really likes his mid-range pull-ups, really likes his contested jump shots, likes his post-ups, and he's not terrible at them, but I don't really think that should be... Maybe it can be a staple of his game, but it can't be like the thing that he does. Paolo is a ridiculous athlete. His measurables are almost exactly that of fucking LeBron James. Like his body type, his athleticism, his speed, the fact that he dribbles the ball as well as he does at his size. There's actually a lot of direct comparison to LeBron, but the difference is in the shot diet, and I think if he cleans that up, that could dramatically increase his ceiling and thus dramatically increase the ceiling of the Magic. But until I actually see that happen, there's a lot of people who have been projecting them to go to higher heights than I think is really realistic, personally. But there's no reason they shouldn't be a pretty good team in the Eastern Conference yet again. Right below them, I have the Indiana Pacers. I do recognize that the Pacers made the conference finals last year, but I don't think that I would see that happening again. I think that was heavily predicated on the matchups they got. They got some pretty lucky situations in terms of their matchup. They played the Milwaukee Bucks, who they really only had to deal with Chris Middleton throughout the entirety of that series. I don't know if Giannis played at all, and I think Dame played half of it. Giannis might have played a game or two. Round 2, they played the Knicks, who dealt with a shitload of injuries. Were already injured going into that postseason. Not to take any credit away, but I am taking credit away. I don't really think that this is a team that you should expect to be in the conference finals again. I do think the fact that they have Pascal throughout the year rather than a trade deadline acquisition should be helpful. A lot of where they go depends on Tyrese Halliburton's aggressiveness looking for his own shot. For me, I think that is the X factor for determining how good this team can be and how good he can be, which... Again, similar to what I said about the Magic, like they go as Paolo goes, I would say with the Pacers, they go as Tyrese goes. Pascal was able to be a really good contributor in the postseason for them this previous year, but if they're going to be anything other than just a pretty good playoff team, it will be because Tyrese Halliburton is just a world beater, and as of right now, that hasn't been the case. Injuries did play some part in that in this previous postseason, so maybe you could argue they made it that far even dealing with that situation, but I don't know. I don't really think that the ceiling on this team is all that high. I do think that the defense could improve a little bit because there is some schematic stuff they could be changing that would improve things, but I'm not anticipating like contending level Indiana Pacers anytime soon. Next at 15 and 16, we have both LA teams, the Lakers and the Clippers. I'm not actually sure. They're essentially sharing the same spot. I'm not sure which one of these teams will be better because the Lakers have the better duo, but the Clippers have better depth and they have the better, well, I guess I can't say for certain that they have the better coach, but Tyronn Lue is one of the better coaches in the NBA. Kawhi Leonard just played the most healthy season of his career. James Harden is actually pretty good, at making you a consistent, steady ship throughout the season. So he would probably keep the Clippers still in that playoff contention. There are a lot of people who think the Clippers might outright miss the playoffs. I still think they're too talented, even with Paul George no longer being there. You know, Paul George is missing a third to a half of the season every year. They also didn't have James Harden when that was happening up until this last year. So holistically, this is still a good roster. Zubats is still good. Norman Powell is still good. Terrence Mann is solid. You have some decent wings out there. A couple of 3-and-D wings they signed this offseason, I believe. There's a good team here. The Lakers, I think, have more upside. They have more potential swing factor. Of course, the addition of J.J. Redick as their head coach is the biggest splash. There is also Dalton Knecht, who they drafted in the middle of the first round, who is a very, very good three-point shooter, and three-point shooting has been a thing that has consistently been a problem for the Lakers. And J.J. Redick is, of course, was a shooter in his career. Apparently, the moment that he was drafted, he started drawing up plays for Dalton on the spot. Some fucking Rain Man shit, I don't know. The coaching change is interesting. While I think that sometimes Darvin Ham's incompetence would be overblown by Lakers fans, it also was very prevalent. And I do think that there is this natural tendency with the Lakers and Lakers fans where people just want to tell them they're wrong all the time. And they are wrong all the time. But in the case of Darvin Ham, he's just truly a bad coach. And J.J. Redick could be a good one. We don't know. Just because he's good at doing podcasts doesn't mean that he's good at communicating those same ideas to NBA players. But I do think that he'll probably be fine. And if he actually ends up being a very good Pat Riley-esque head coach, as apparently the Buss family seems to think he can be, then that would actually do a lot, because I think there is still enough talent with the Lakers, presuming that LeBron James doesn't have a fall off at the age of 40, which would be entirely reasonable if it did happen, but I'm not going to predict it's happening until it does. The Lakers with that duo, Anthony Davis had a great season last year, played the most games of his career in a very long time. Their role players are better, even though I don't love the fact that a lot of their shot creation is coming from D'Lo and Austin Reeves, both of which who are not amazing at that aspect of the game, but better at it than anything that they could trade for. But the boom potential for the Lakers, I think, is higher. I think the Clippers probably have a higher floor and the Lakers have a higher ceiling, but I'm really not sure how the season's going to go for either of them, especially because a lot of their star players are actually all of their star players are guys who have been injury prone, who have missed big stretches of time throughout the season. And in the case of both teams, they're pretty heavily reliant on them for actually being a competitive team. The Lakers more so than the Clippers, but you get my point. Below them, I am predicting that the San Antonio Spurs will be a playoff team in the Western Conference this year. They might be play-in, based on where I have them in this ranking here, but one way or the other, I think the Spurs are going to be a lot more competitive this year. They're going to be playing Victor Wembanyama full-time, no minutes restriction throughout the entire year, and it's going to be a version of Wemby who is second half of the year Wemby rather than first half of the year Wemby. His overall rookie season was still great, historically great, but in the second half of the year, he was an infinitely better player. There were conversations, and legitimately and rightfully so, about him being a top 10 player in the NBA when he went on that stretch. I see no reason why he wouldn't pick it up where he left it off going into this year. I'm also really excited about the Chris Paul addition. I recognize that Chris is very old, but one thing that he still does well is get the ball in the right spot. And Chris is notoriously one of the most prolific lob throwers in the history of this game. When he played in New Orleans, he had Tyson Chandler as an option for that. And when he played with the Clippers, he had DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin, of course, Clint Capella on the Houston Rockets. That was just a rather prominent aspect of his playmaking. Well, Victor Wembanyama, I would give it to Anthony Davis right now, but I would be shocked if Victor Wembanyama did not go down as the greatest lob target in the history of basketball, because the reach that he has, you just have to throw it vaguely at the basket. And Chris Paul can put it on point exactly where it needs to be. And the fact that you have him and now Trey Mann, whoever starts, whoever comes off the bench, doesn't matter. One of those guys is going to be on the floor virtually at all times. So someone who can actually competently set up Victor Wembanyama will be on the floor at all times, which will elevate his game even further than it has already reached. Taking it to those new heights will probably make them a considerably better team. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Trey Mann and Wemby, when they played together, had a positive plus-minus. So if you can get that same effect, but now Chris Paul's on the floor, and if you could hopefully just survive well enough the minutes without him, especially on the defensive end of the floor, I think you can be a super competitive team. Like, this isn't the deepest team in the world, and a lot of their core role players are guys who have some pretty significant limitations to their game, but I think that's made up for by the fact that Victor Wembanyama laughs in the face of limitations. So, yeah, I think I'm pretty high on the Spurs. I know it's not uncommon to think that they can be a play-in tier team, but I actually have them over two Western Conference teams that I imagine a lot of people would put over them in their personal power rankings. Those teams I have at 18 and 19, and those are the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors. I will say I levied a criticism against the Phoenix Suns in my X Factors video. I believe it was the X Factors video, or no, every NBA team's biggest weakness. I don't think I've done the X Factors video yet, so look out for that if it does come out. I said that their defense was probably a little bit worse than it actually is. In reality, the biggest issue that this team has is its redundancy offensively and how that redundancy affects them in fourth quarter situations. The Phoenix Suns statistically had the worst fourth quarter offense in the NBA last year, and that bit them time and time again. They're probably like a 55-win team if they execute better in the clutch, because they're also consistently in very close games regularly. The offense just does not have enough dynamicism to it. They don't have rim pressure or high volume three-point shooting. And if you don't have either of those facets to your game, you're just not going to be that good on offense. Even if you can shoot historically well from mid-range, you still have a ton of limitations that come with that offensive shot diet, and I just think that that will continue to make them a mid-regular season team, and one that has a little hope of getting out of the first round unless they happen to just get an extremely favorable matchup, which a lot of people thought that the Minnesota Timberwolves were. They were categorically not an easy matchup for them, but I think they will be better than the Warriors, because the Warriors are Stephen Curry, and then, yeah, Jonathan Kuminga has a lot of room to grow as a shot creator. I recognize they're looking at him to be a significant offensive option going into the year, but the fact of the matter is he is a poor jump shooter off of the dribble, off of the catch, whatever type of shot it is. Not great. He's occasionally shown a mid-range pull-up that looked good here or there, but he's mostly someone who just rolls to the rim really well, moves well in transition, cuts to the basket a lot. Like, he gets a good amount of opportunities. He's a good driver off of the dribble as well. But in terms of like, okay, I'm giving you the ball, go get me a bucket. Steph is the only guy on the Warriors that can do that reliably in pretty much any capacity. Kuminga can do it a little bit. Podziemski can do it a little bit. Andrew Wiggins can do it a little bit. Maybe Moses Moody could hit a mid-range pull-up here or there if Steve Kerr ever had the audacity to play him. But there's just no ability to score the fucking basketball besides for Steph. And Steph is a generational offensive player, but he needs the guys around him to, if not being capable of shot creation, they at least need to be consistent shot finishers, catch and shoot guys. Obviously, Kuminga is in that category as a cutter, but Draymond Green isn't the offensive player that he used to be. Whether it's Kevon Looney or Trace Jackson Davis, neither of those are particularly talented centers. So you're just asking all of your offense to come out of a 34-year-old Steph, and there's just not enough available. I like the Buddy Hield edition. I think Shake Milton is a cool, not Shake Milton. Why do I always confuse them? DeAnthony Melton. I guess that makes sense. Shake Milton, DeAnthony Melton, kind of a similar name. One way or the other, I just don't think they have enough. I also don't like Kyle Anderson. That's yet another guy who's really not all that capable as a play finisher, especially a catch and shoot guy. So I think the Warriors are at risk of missing the playoffs this year. They'll probably be a play-in team as they were previously, if I'm recalling correctly. So yeah, sucks to suck, but I actually think they'll be worse than Phoenix, which for me, being the Phoenix hater that I am and the Steph Curry fan that I am, pains me to say. But moving on, I should add actually about the Golden State Warriors, if you want to see what a competent hypothetical GM could do with that Warriors team, you should check out my series over on my 2K channel where I am doing a Warriors modern series. I am going to be doing a Kobe Lakers series, or I have been doing that, but I'm doing a modern and historic one at the same time. So if you want to see what a team actually building around Steph properly could look like, then go check that out. It will be one of the top links in the description. But moving on to the Miami Heat, this is a team that is always a little bit difficult to evaluate because of the black magic that they are historically known for pulling out of their ass. They are capable of turning shit into diamonds at the turn of a corner. So for that reason, if this team ends up outperforming the expectations that I'm currently setting for them, it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world, because outperforming expectations is what Miami regularly does, while simultaneously doing it in a way that doesn't increase their expectations. That's what's interesting about them, is I feel like they get praise. I mean, I guess this is kind of the nature of being a lower seeded playoff team that makes 2 finals runs as the 5th seed and the 8th seed in 2020 and 2023 respectively. Like, if you make it, then it's impressive and you get all the kudos in the world. And if you don't, it's like, well, they're the 8th seed. What did you expect? So they've kind of avoided criticism for that reason. And as of late, it leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Jimmy Butler being able to just bullshit throughout the regular season leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I also think shot creation this is another team that really struggles with that, particularly because Jimmy Butler coasts so much in the regular season. Like, a team that needs offense to the degree that it does really can't have Jimmy Butler just fucking around all the time. Tyler Hero's just not a strong enough shot creator. Terry Rozier's solid at it, but he should not be a primary ball handler for the extent of time that I imagine he will end up being the primary ball handler for Miami this year. But Terry, Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic getting a little bit better. There are areas of improvement that can happen on this team to where I actually think they'll probably be better next year. They also, I don't know if it's Kevin Ware. I don't remember what his name is, but something Ware, a big man that they drafted, also has a lot of promise, and the Heat are pretty good at making a rookie unreasonably good for no reason. So if they end up being a team that just comes out of nowhere in the playoffs and is really good, wouldn't be the hugest surprise in the world. But as of right now, I'm expecting them to be the worst of the mid teams. So if we are taking this list from the top one more time, just to remind you what it was, remember there are 9 contenders in the NBA, so we're going 10 through 20 here. At 10, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. At 11, the Sacramento Kings. 12, the Pelicans. 13, the Magic. 14, the Pacers. I put 15, the Lakers, and 15, the Clippers, but you could really flip them. I flipped them multiple times. San Antonio Spurs at 17, the Phoenix Suns at 18, the Warriors at 19, and the Miami Heat at 20. Next episode is going to be ranking every contender, and I'm also going to loosely talk about their potential matchups, just because I also kind of want to, the title question of the video will be, who will win the championship this upcoming year? So if you want to watch that video, that will be out after this one, probably by about a day, maybe 2. But with that said, that is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.